Hey y'all, it is Rick here with Uncommon Communion. You may be surprised on a Sunday morning to see in your feed a video and not a written reflection from me. I will explain, and let us, though, begin as we always begin here at Uncommon Communion by recognizing, realizing, affirming that we are always and everywhere in the holy presence of God and each other. So I had the intention of writing tonight, and I had a really good one in mind. Unfortunately, time has gotten away from me. And as I mentioned before in a previous video, that recording a video is a lot less time consuming, especially as it gets late and I get tired, than sitting to write. And I think here in a minute, when I tell you about what I wanted to write about, I think it might actually come out better in a video. So this perhaps was a good opportunity. It has been a full evening, but a good evening in the sense that I connected with my two siblings today, this evening. Without going into too much detail, our mom is ailing, and it's nothing critical at this point. She is 83 years old, and her mobility is declining. And it was a really important conversation, probably a bit of an overdue conversation with my two siblings, my two younger siblings, 3 years and 5 years younger, one of whom is in California where my parents live. So that sister had definitely some insights that were helpful and useful that I didn't know because of the distance. So it was a very valuable conversation. Pushed me back though in my evening, and then lo and behold, after that, this was a surprise. I got a call from a cousin, and this is the cousin who is the brother of my cousin who died a few weeks ago, about a month ago. And he's an interesting cousin because my dad is his uncle, and they've actually become quite close. And this cousin of mine was calling first and foremost to talk with me to ask how my mom was doing, and really just to know if my dad needed anything, and how he would feel about being reached out to. And it was really quite extraordinary. I have not, I don't think, ever talked to this cousin on the phone, at least not at any length, and it was really good to hear from him. He did share about the grief that he is still feeling for his brother's loss, and how sad he feels at the way that his brother died. You'll remember that it was alcoholism that took the life of my cousin. Um, so it was good to talk, and that did push me back 45 more minutes. It was well worth it. But here I am as it gets later, and I'm pretty tired. It's been a busy few days. What I did want to talk to you about is what I was going to write about. Now, usually on Sundays, I write about the gospel or the scripture, the liturgical scripture. And tomorrow's scripture, because it's still Saturday here, is the Good Samaritan. And you know what? In this day and age, it's there's so much that can be said about the Good Samaritan that I think those of us who are very diligently seeking and honestly trying to follow the way of Christ, there is always so much that we can get from there. The thing is that many of the Christians, and I put that in quotation marks, who don't want to hear Jesus's message of justice and peace and compassion and empathy, you know, saying any number of things about the Good Samaritan isn't going to have an impact. Now, I know my listeners, you all probably are in the category that it does have an impact, and there is a good reminder of that. Um, I just don't really know what to say about it in this day and age. So I wasn't going to write about it, and instead, I wanted to write, and I will share here with you verbally what 40 years ago tomorrow, July 12th, it'll be July 12th probably when you see this, what 40 years ago was and what I was doing 40 years ago when I was 15 years old, 1985. So I'll give you a second to think. You don't need to think because I'm going to put it in the title of what it was, but it was Live Aid. Yeah, the Live Aid concert 40 years ago, July 12th. And I know exactly where I was. And I know exactly how it changed my life. And it did because the band U2, who is my number one favorite band, I haven't talked a lot about them here, but they continue to be tremendously significant for me personally and spiritually and historically and musically and so many ways. I discovered them that day. I did not know them. I had not heard them before Live Aid. And there I was, 15 years old, watching on my parents' TV. We didn't have MTV like some people did. So I was watching it on whatever, network, one of the three network channels, and watching it. Interestingly enough, this is kind of a bit of a side note. I remember the radio station. One of the radio stations was simulcasting it, which somebody had told me, maybe one of my parents, was that you're supposed to turn on the radio, so that you could have like stereo with the TV, and that didn't work because they weren't perfectly synced. So it just was very kind of confusing and strange. But I do have that very distinctive memory. Even more so, what I remember was seeing U2. And if you ever have watched the video, and maybe I'll put a link to it here in the notes, it is incredible. Bono sings the song "Bad" and goes out into the audience and finds someone. And they were a relatively young band at that point. They'd only put out their first album a handful of years, 3 years, 5 years, I think, earlier. And here they were on the biggest stage, and they were, I think, in so many ways so memorable. And I saw them, and I had never seen anything like that before. I'd never been to a live concert. I didn't even know music could sound like that or could have that kind of impact. And immediately the next day or the day after, I went out and I bought The Unforgettable Fire, which was the album that they were promoting at that time. And then, began to explore their back catalog. And then in 1987, a couple of years later, when I was 17, they put out Joshua Tree. And that still is one of my 5 Desert Island discs. If I could only have 5, and I would have a really hard time just narrowing music down to 5, that would be one of them. But I have very significant memories of that day. And then the other memory I have, which came a little bit later than U2. I think I looked up the list just the other day, and it was U2, and they were in Wembley, London. You might remember there was a London venue and a Philadelphia venue that were going on at the same time. And Queen played 2 groups later. I think Dire Straits actually was in between the two, which is just what a trio: U2, Dire Straits, Queen. And I remember seeing Queen, and still in kind of the afterglow, the joyful shock of the euphoria of U2, seeing Queen perform. And again, I don't know if you've seen that before. I'll put a link to it. It was mind blowing, because there was this group with this incredible singer, this flamboyant Freddie Mercury, and I still think about it and watch it and get chills, because especially with the song Radio Gaga, where everybody is clapping in sync, and I mean it's astounding. And again, to a 15-year-old who really never, I didn't grow up in a household where there was a lot of music. I listened to a few records and would listen to the radio, but even compared to my wife, who grew up in a very different household where there was a lot of music, mine was not that way. So to see and hear, Live Aid, U2 and Queen particularly, but even other groups that I remember, it had a real impact. And I think it was really, I don't say this lightly, it was kind of a life-changing day. And it is amazing to think that it is 40 years ago. Next month, August, will be the 40th anniversary of when we moved. I was living in Houston, Texas at the time, that we moved to California. And that particular milestone, to loop it back to my parents, they will have lived in a house that they are still living in for now, for 40 years. And that anniversary is coming up in a few weeks. So I am grateful that you are here. Grateful that I could say in words and you can hear me say, I think in ways beyond just writing, about my joy and wonder of that day 40 years ago. Yeah, 40 years ago. I'll close with a line from a song that is one of U2's early songs. You can look this up. I'll see if I can put a link to it. It's called Rejoice, and it was in 1981. It was on the Unforgettable Fire, that album that I mentioned, or maybe the album before that. But the lyric says this. It says, "I can't change the world, but I can change the world in me." Yeah, let that be our prayer, especially as we look at, the craziness that is all around us continues to, we can't change the world, but we can change how we are. And as we change how we are in our relationship to the world does change. Perhaps in small ways, perhaps sometimes in ways we can't see or measure right away. It does change though. So again, I hope you have a wonderful Sunday. Blessing and good. Be well.